Okay. Throughout the history of the entertainment industry, there has never been a more dramatic change in popularity than in with comic book movies. And the two most popular of those being Marvel and DC. Today, I'm going to talk about how superheroes became mainstream, the differences between Marvel and DC, and why I think Marvel is much better than DC. Superhero movies have been around for a long time, but wasn't taken very seriously until recently. Within the past 10 years, they really started to explode. One reason for this was because of the economic crash in 2008. During this time, a lot of people lost their jobs and homes, and they started watching comic book movies as a way to relax. According to the New York Film Academy, people wanted to escape into a different world where the hero always triumphs and there were clear lines between good and evil. It also doesn't hurt the fact that this was around the time when Iron Man launched into the theaters, making this the year the Marvel Cinematic Universe was created. The second reason for the popularity of comic book movies was for the advancement of the CGI and special effects. Compared to when they were first made, with costumes being made out of rubber and sloppy editing, now the CGI used in superhero movies make them look as extremely real. So real that it's hard to tell the difference. Now we have advanced CGI that make movie characters look like they came straight out of the pages of the comic books, and costumes that look far more believable. A third reason is that all of these movies were designated to older audiences, even though they are PG-13. They were more designated to people who grew up reading the comic books, people who grew up reading comic books. So it would be an accurate statement to say that they were designed to feed off nostalgia, if that makes any kind of sense. The rivalry between these two companies has been around for the past 70 years, and it's fair to say that both companies have their share of good and bad things. Though both companies present a make-believe world, Marvel brings more realistic elements into it. Marvel also takes more risks so they can afford to experiment, like making movies like Guardians of the Galaxy and, Ant-Man and Fantastic Four. And they can get as weird as they want with it. DC, on the other hand, is better at giving their characters depth and backstory. You can see examples of this in characters such as Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. Another big difference between Marvel and DC movies is their roster of characters. Marvel characters are more realistic and have a darker tone to their stories, with hidden messages, such as the X-Men with their messages of race and tolerance, or Spider-Man with theirs of responsibility. However, DC is more well known for their character development. Instead of focusing on hidden themes, they put more effort into their storytelling, choosing to focus on telling a good story instead of teaching a good lesson, like how Marvel does it. Just like how their characters are different, so are the worlds they live in. They both exist in fictional worlds, but Marvel uses more real-life locations than actual made-up places, such as how in 2012's Avengers, they used New York. And so if you were watching Batman or Superman, they would probably go to Gotham or Metropolis. Although both Marvel and DC are fascinating worlds with interesting characters and ever-expanding universes, I have to say that in terms of movies, Marvel is definitely in the lead. Unlike DC, Marvel has much better interconnected universe, with movies like The Avengers, Avengers Age of Ultron, Endgame, Captain America Civil War. You can have multiple heroes and villains interact with each other and have them cross over into other franchises, other movies, other everything. They can create new friendships and new alliances. Using post-credit scenes, they can set up movies in advance or even television shows for the future. Many other studios have tried to copy this, but to this day, none other has been as successful as Marvel. And yes, DC has tried to do this as well, but they rushed it. Instead of slowly introducing characters over several movies, they decided to do the big team up before they were really ready for it. It's kind of like running before you learn how to walk. Anyways, when they did Justice League, it was one of the worst received movies in history, getting a 40% score on Rotten Tomatoes. Another thing that makes Marvel better than DC is that they have more characters to make movies out of. After making the Iron Man, Thor, and Captain America trilogy, that gave them the option to experiment a little bit, using other characters that aren't as well known, such as Shang-Chi, the Eternals, or again, Ant-Man, because let's be real, like, no one ever thought they'd use Ant-Man. So weird. And though they weren't all successes, most of them were good opportunities to add things into the MCU that wasn't there before, such as how Doctor Strange added magic, or how, again, Ant-Man added the weird technology of people shrinking, and how Black Panther added vibranium. Everything they do, all the things they bring in, it gets different. They switch things. That's what makes it amazing. Especially now, since Disney is taking over Fox, this gives them the chance to get back all the properties that they've sold off, such as the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, increasing the roster of heroes yet again. In connection, Marvel movies are much better than DC's, with better storytelling, better characters, and a more well-versed universe, and a more organized universe. And if you want a prime example of this, I suggest you watch Captain America, Civil War, and Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. 2 movies that, if you watch side by side, you'll realize are very similar, but very different at the same time, with the difference being that one is much better in quality. And if you want further proof that DC's interconnected universe is not as good as everyone thinks it is, I suggest you go watch 2018's Suicide Squad and 2021's The Suicide Squad. 2 movies that are similar but extremely different in quality. Yes, thank you.